will explore the Blade Dance Assassin, formerly Whirlwind Assassin, renamed for Season 5. This brings some new changes to the ability, such as different attack speeds for one hand and shield, and dual-wielding claws. This gives us the opportunity to explore some different itemization options that allow us to play a little bit more defensively or go more offensively as we so choose. This is a really flexible build that allows us to build poison damage if we would like. We can even stack small charms with elemental damage, or we can just go ham on the physical damage side. You'll note in this video that as we're starting out, we'll begin with some early builds, and that's where I tend to use Fade, and as we have some endgame gear, I transition into using Burst of Speed, as it allows for us to move a little bit more fluidly through maps and hit some stragglers a bit quicker. So let's begin with the early gear. Again, a lot of options. Early gear here, we're starting with Chaos, so that means we have to have at least an Ohm, which means you've probably found some other things along the way. So we're not starting completely naked, although I do have a Whirlwind video exploring what it looks like to use this ability completely naked, and it still works. But we're looking here at what happens if we add a little bit more power to it. Some good starting gear is Orphan's Call or the Natalia set. Both of them got buffs in the next Season 5 patch. I would also recommend picking up an Angelic Amulet and Ring as soon as you can, as they can provide a lot of needed attack rating. Now, you'll see here, we've got some shields on the list, and shields are not as much of a meme as one might think. They actually provide a lot of survivability early on. There are some changes, like I mentioned, one of which is that Blade Dance now uses 4 frames per attack if you're using a one-hander and shield, and it uses 5 frames per attack, the same as it was in Season 4 if you're dual-wielding claws. Another really big buff is the buff tracker that's being highlighted down in the bottom left corner. This allows us to track our Tiger Strike charges. And Tiger Strike does increase the area of effect of Whirlwind, and it does not deplete your charges. So you can get 3 Tiger Strike charges up and Whirlwind for a minute with an extra 40% AoE range. This gets us closer to barbarians and their giant gorilla arms. Now, again, more changes for Whirlwind. An additional change that we'll see showcased in just a minute is seeing that we can click and hold with Whirlwind to single target bosses. This is great for creatures that have a lot of high HP, where before we had to use a little bit of a triangle strategy where you had to kind of paint a little picture around the creature that you wanted to hit, otherwise Whirlwind would auto attack. Now you can just click and hold and you'll zigzag back and forth over the creature, keeping your uptime on that mob closer to 100%. While we're taking a look at some of this low gear level setup, I would recommend using a Heavenly Garb if you do not have a Lawbringer that you were able to craft, or if you're not using full Nat set, a Lionheart chest, a Duress, or a Gloom. All of those are great options as well, but making sure you have some level of Sanctuary Aura gives you a lot of flexibility in areas you can farm and deals with those undead mobs just tremendously better when your gear kind of sucks. The next thing that I would focus is your resistances and your attack rating. Making sure you're able to hit mobs, especially at a lower level, is really challenging, so focusing that AR rating is going to help you a lot with a melee build. After that, your resistances are really key. Now, you can leech through the moon if you're hitting mobs, but if their elemental damage just kills you outright beforehand, as you'll notice gets pretty close in some of these early situations, you can't leech when you're dead. Make sure you stay alive and you'll be able to kill just about everything. Your damage is not a problem. So as we're watching this Chaos Sanctuary run, I am using a one-hander and shield, and it still goes pretty quick, and Diablo's not much of a problem. One reason that a shield could be a better choice given right now is what's scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Claw block was changed. It now caps at 1 block every 4 frames. You cannot block more than 1 time within a 4-frame time span. Diablo 2 uses 25 frames per second. This means that you can only block with claw block once every 0.16 seconds. Now, this doesn't seem like a big deal, but it kinda is when you start getting into really dense maps, or in situations where there are a lot of effects hitting you all at one time, whether that's from Gloams or Declone's laser or ground effects during Wrathmaw. All of those things will tick more often than that 1.16 time per second in conjunction with the other attacks that you're dealing with in those fights. As long as you are leeching, you will probably be fine. It takes a pretty beefed up pack of archers or stacked gloams to really just nuke you if you are using claw block. It's still a good option. Using 2 claws is still significantly more damage. We'll take a look at that a little bit later when we go into the high gear level setups. But if you're looking to not die, if you want to have a little bit more survivability, the level of drop off between using a one-hander and shield and using claw block with 2 claws is not as much as you would expect. It's definitely a lot less than I expected. I thought there was no way that we could remotely compare with the damage that was being done by 2 claws. This is obviously going to get bigger, the gap will get wider as you start crafting 400, 500, 600 ED Eth claws, but in a reasonable endgame setup that can do a 250 density, 20% max HP map in around 10 minutes, you're not going to notice too much of a difference between using a shield and using 2 claws. I'm in this case going to be using a Eth Fury as my second claw. It's not the best roll, it's not the best claw, but it does well enough. Some other options that can outpace it are Eth ED slammed versions of Mage Slayer, and Jade Talon is this particularly defensive option, and even the new Runic Talon, the new Stalker's Cull can be a great option too, especially if you want to have a little bit less of a cooldown on your D-Flight. The only negative of using that Runic Talon, the Stalker's Cull, the new claw that lowers the cooldown on Dragon Flight for us assassins with this build, is that it will use your Tiger Strike charges. So that means if you do Dragon Flight somewhere, you will need to hit or attack about 3 times with Tiger Strike to get 3 charges back up. It's a little funky because when you attack with Tiger Strike, you attack with both weapons, which means you gain 2 charges every attack, but sometimes one can miss and the other will hit, which means that you might only gain 1 charge. So it can be a little bit tricky to get those 3 charges up, and limiting the amount of times you need to do that per map is definitely helpful. Here we're taking a look at the difference between claw block and using a shield in a mapping situation. So we can watch here and see, well, what happens? What's the difference? How big of a difference is it? And it's pretty significant. You can see I can stand on this pack pretty fine with just a shield, but if I have a claw on, it's pretty tricky. We can also watch here, and I'm going to swap a claw to a shield in the middle of this pack, and though the Redemption Aura does tick once and it does help with my sustain, you can watch how much longer it takes my HP to drop once that shield is equipped. Alright, obviously this is fairly unrealistic, but it might happen if you get disconnected, so just something to keep in mind. It will increase your survivability a bit if you're using a shield, and as we watch the damage output a little bit later, it might not change so much. Now, again, no claw block is, or shield block is perfect, and you're going to die if you do what I just did here. So here we get some damage, and we get to take a look at that single target change to Whirlwind once we clear out the extra packs here. Now notice I just click and hold here, and instead of making a little triangle around the Cow Queen, your character just zigzags back and forth over it. This makes it a lot easier to make sure that every single attack is hitting that creature, and makes bosses significantly faster with a Whirlwind build, and a lot easier on your wrist. So you don't have to be painting back and forth to try and kill the boss. You just kind of click and hold on it and watch everything die. If you're curious what the map mods are for the 3 maps, those are posted at the end of the video, so you can check those out. I promise they're the same ones. I have the full videos of every run if you want to see it, if you really need that proof. Otherwise, you can take my word for it. Now, here we can see that as long as we're able to leech from the mob, we're going to survive if we don't get one shot. That one got a little close. Alright, here we go. On to maps in some rock solid gear. Now, with the new Act 5 mercenary with battle cry. I would recommend using that merc at the very end game, giving it a last wish with a Raycor's helm is going to give you the most bang for your buck. It will provide a ton of leech through life tap, in addition to the amp damage that you are causing yourself using Atma's or Headhunter's Glory. If that's a little rich for your blood, the Mist runeword for bows is now a really great option with an Act 1 Vigor Merc that will allow you to go full fade with this build instead of burst of speed, and it would give you the opportunity to get that extra PDR and not have to have as much res on your gear and charms, allowing you to throw more max AR in your charms. I also don't have an Annihilus on this character. It was just something I had left over for Season 4, so there's a lot of room for improvement, but you can see the build is already pretty strong, even without being completely, totally maxed out. In the upcoming season, there's also a couple of changes that hurt the build that you see right here. One is that this build has 95% curse immunity. If it was running Fade, it would have over 100% curse immunity. That feels really, really nice. You don't get decrepified, you don't get amp damaged. It makes sure that your speed stays up and your survivability stays up. The way for us to solve that problem going into Season 5, where the Crown of Ages will only roll with 50% curse reduction, is the new gloves that roll 35% curse reduction on them. They have some useless stats for us in faster cast rate, but that 35% on gloves is really nice. We don't need increased attack speed on our gloves. The Soul Drainers got nerfed down from 8% to 5%. They're still fine, but I don't think they're a necessity. Laying of Hands is always great. That's what I'm wearing right here. You can roll Deadly Strike on a crafted pair of gloves and work that way, but I think getting that 35% curse immunity there allows you to run Fade, Gloves, Crown of Ages, and you are curse immune from those three options. This frees up all of your corruptions for anything you want and doesn't take up those really valuable slots. Alright, I think that concludes the fire hose information that I have to offer to you on the Whirlwind changes, or now Blade Dance changes for Assassins in Season 5. I look forward to playing this build or a variant of it, and if you have any questions, you can leave something in the comments below, or you can find me on Discord. I highly recommend going to the Project Diablo 2 Discord and hanging out in the Assassin channel. We have a lot of theory crafting, a lot of conversation to try and better figure out and understand how this super funky, clunky sometimes, but also oddly elegant class functions to maximize our output and compete with a lot of the more popular classes. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for taking the time, and I look forward to seeing you out there in Season 5.